I'm here to help you assemble your model and do all the right steps so that you can get like a nice, wonderful result and you don't have to go through the trials and tribulations of getting it wrong. I'm Khan and you're watching The Wrath of Minis. Luckily, assembling miniatures is not all that complicated. It actually is a pretty straightforward thing to do. You just need a few tools, a bit of patience, some light, and perhaps something to listen to in the background whilst you go about doing it. Different miniatures require different types of prep work in order for you to get to the point of your painting and priming. For most miniatures though, however, like Games Workshop or Kingdom Death, we are dealing with a hard plastic. And so the only thing that you're going to need with that is something like thin cement glue. This stuff is great for that kind of thing. However, there are other models out there like resin and metal, which you're going to need super glue for. However, I'm not going to do any of that stuff with those types of models because practically everything that I'm going to show you here applies to them. The only thing you need to be aware of is that the glue that you use is different because they just won't adhere in the same way. You're going to need a pair of very sharp clippers, hopefully with a very flat end on this side. Not only that, you're going to need a couple of sanding sticks. Now, they don't need to be super low grit. I tend to think like 1,000 and 1,500 are a good place. You're going to need an X-Acto knife with a sharp blade. Normally you can get like a packet of these blades. It's good to have this around. You really want a sharp knife because it will be super helpful and make things just easier along the road. Another thing that I really like, which I came into a fair bit later, oddly enough, is sanding sponges. Now, TAMIYA, this stuff here, I really like. Now, what it's cool about them is that it's super flexible, very bendy, and you can get it into places that are a little hard to reach. They do a variety of different grits, and I have a whole bunch of different grits, something from 400 all the way to about 1,500 roughly, or 2,000 I think. And all I do is I just snip a bit or cut out a bit of that I'm going to utilize, roughly in the shapes of these, and then I use them to sand down the models. And that's really about all you need. Well, obviously, we need the sprues, we need the miniature that we're going to work with, and then we're going to cut them out and get this thing assembled. Before we get into building this model, there are perhaps a few things we should just talk about, think about, because this here is the starting point for everything we're going to be doing later. Firstly, when we start cutting the model, I do recommend buying a specific pair of clippers for just this purpose. Never use these clippers on anything other than this plastic, because you don't want to deform the edge of these of the blades here, and so you would make sure that you always keep a clean cut when you're cutting your sprues out. Also, I recommend cutting all of the pieces out first. Once you've done all of that, you can then begin to sand each of the individual parts, going through that until you're pretty comfortable with how everything is looking, just in mold line removal or making sure that you're getting rid of the nub from where it was connected to the sprue. Once you've done that, then you should start to dry fit things together. Just make sure that that the two parts connect properly with each other and that there isn't like something peculiar or something in the way that's stopping it from getting a solid connected feel to it. Once you've gotten all of those things, then, and you're happy with how everything is looking together, then you begin gluing. When it comes to gluing, I can't say like less is more, because just that you should be careful. This is an important little point, especially when it comes to the cement stuff. The cement stuff literally can melt the plastic. And so if you're not careful and you apply too much of it, especially in a location, you can actually deform the model in its entirety, or in wherever it's gotten wet, I suppose. So you just need to be careful with it. A little bit goes a long way. And once you've gotten all of those parts assembled, you can obviously take a look at it, see how it's going, and then you can connect it to its base. And at that point in time, voila, you've got a model. And that's really what you need. And then you obviously keep doing those steps until you've either built your squad or you're finished and you're ready to get priming. So whilst you're building your model, a lot of the times you'll find that just the way that the pieces get constructed, that you will find that there are lines in your model, and they tend to be sort of gaps or where two different parts are joined together. And that might be something that's very easily visible to your eye. Depending on your level of how much you dislike that, don't want that to be a part of your miniature, or if it pulls your immersion out, and you want to make sure that it's as flawless as you can be, sometimes you have to go out of your way and fill in the gaps. Now, plastic putty is a very straightforward, water-soluble tool that is useful for filling in those spaces. And it's nothing like not taking the time and effort to fill in these gaps, because once you start priming and painting, you can never cover this stuff up. And this also applies to mold lines as well. If you don't take the time to clean those things, which is a bit arduous, I will say, especially when you're doing lots of troops, it can be like, wow, this really is time consuming. But if you don't do it, it will be there forever, and there will be nothing you can do after the fact in regards to those things. So if you're gonna do it, now's the time to do it, and now's the time to care. And if you don't care, totally fine, don't even worry about it. But that's the thing. This stuff is a sort of a time-consuming hobby, which is great because it takes time, but it's also takes a lot of time. So it's great to listen to something in the background or watch something. Also, once you have completed and built your model, some models may have, I don't know, let's say like manufacturing oils or oils from your hands, and this applies more specifically to like resins, but maybe not even resins, metal models in particular I've noticed them with. But of course, we see less and less metal models these days. They're much more hard plastic. And it could be worthwhile giving your model a wash. Now, that seems a bit crazy because, it's a model. What does it care? But really, we're kind of just doing our due diligence and prepping the model for the future in terms of when we start priming things. Because if, for instance, we have like some oil from our hands from something, whatever, and we've applied it to the model, and then we start to prime it, we might have an adhesive issue with the paint and the plastic itself. And so it's worth taking this time just to make sure that nothing goes wrong in this process. We give it a wash, or you can just use an old toothbrush that you're not using, and a little bit of dish soap and some water. You give it a little scrub, give it a clean, and let it dry off by itself, and then you are good to go. I want to talk about an important sort of concept here, and this is called sub-assembly. There are times where the model is intricate enough, or there are places that are very difficult to reach with a paintbrush because, say, it's under the arm and there's many things that are blocking it, or a character's got a shield and you can't just reach into a certain location. Sub-assembly, or the idea of painting something first before gluing it, can be a useful tool. Now, when you're just starting out, that's hard to exactly know when that's going to be. And obviously, the more that you practice, the better you will be able to see that ahead of time. But there are a couple of times when this situation is easier to spot. For instance, you'll see a lot of people who will keep the head separated from the model. Now, some people want to paint the head separately, and the reason why they want to do that is so that they can get their brush all around the model and see it without anything sort of interfering with that space. For instance, like a Space Marine from like Warhammer 40k, they have like this kind of like guard around their neck. So it means that you can never bring a paintbrush from this angle super well, especially down here, because there's sort of a guard that sits. And so that means that you might want to have the head separate, paint that separately, and then glue it later. So that's a choice. Again, there's models with like shields and stuff like that, where it's very difficult to reach a certain place. Again, you might go, I should keep that separated and then glue it afterwards. For people who are like, not just professional painters, but people who are doing like Golden Demon or going for competition, a lot of people will actually keep their models separated in different parts, paint them up in different ways, because it's obviously easier for them to access certain parts of it and truly give all their attention to a region without having to compromise. Then they assemble it later. The way that you find that is really to each person. It like depends on what you like doing. For the most part, I tend not to do any sub-assembly. Occasionally I do, and there is a key moment, like a lot of the time when it comes to Space Marines, in which that I will do this. And interestingly enough, this is not their heads, this is their backpacks. I tend never to glue their backpack on first. I always do that afterwards because there are whole regions that are difficult for me to get to with my paintbrush when they are glued. And so I will use blue tack, which is a very useful tool, and put it in its place just so that I can see how everything would look, and even while I'm priming it, it all sits there together. But when I need to paint it, I can just pull it off and paint them separately and then recombine them afterwards. So this is a sort of a journey that you kind of have to take on your own and see what you like doing. Everyone works a little differently. When you have a model, say, on a table, you are only really ever seeing it from sort of a bird's eye view looking down, and so you're never going to really see the underside of a model. Now, I wouldn't say that you should leave the underside of the model not painted. I think that would be just not the right thing to do, but you don't have to put quite as much effort on sort of the shadow side of models because obviously you never really ever see them. So I don't know if I care quite so much to have everything in like literal subassembly. Like some people I've seen who paint on the sprue itself, like they'll prime it and then they'll paint it on the sprue, then cutting it out. But I think that's a bit strange because then it's difficult to sand those areas because you've just painted it, and then you have to be even more careful. So that kind of thing is not for me. But again, you have to kind of find what you like. And another part of it is, if you do all this subassembly, maybe you don't get to play the game that you want to be playing. You know, like if I assemble this guard miniature, put it on its base, I can go and play that immediately, even if I haven't painted it. And so there's a bit of like this situation about your painting and your playing, and obviously that's something that you have to balance and figure out for yourself. Let's talk about issues and problems that may arise whilst you are building your model. The best thing you can do is to be patient and take your time with building things, because it's actually extraordinarily hard to fix an issue once it starts happening whilst you are gluing. Because when you're gluing, you're locked into time, and what I mean by this is that you apply the glue, you're applying the models, you're going to hold them together for a moment until they have like solidified, and then you can let go. But if you realize you've put the wrong piece on, then you're in trouble. And this is something we want to avoid. So when we dry fit our stuff, we are doing that. We are making sure that the model is meant to be going together with itself before we do any gluing, because really gluing is us just executing the very last moment of assembling the miniature. Everything beforehand is what we need to get right before we actually put the glue onto the model. Especially with cement glue, because it melds the plastic together, you almost cannot separate them. So you need to get that right. With super glue, you can break them apart from each other, but it can be pretty tough. And because models are delicate, you've got a very likeliness of breaking the model itself, which then leads to compounding other problems, which you really just don't want to get into. What happens when you have a delicate part and you've glued it together and it's the wrong placement? Then are you gonna clip it? Well, then you could. Are you going to break it? Well, then you might have to fix something because you're bending plastic, which could be a problem because then you're stretching plastic and that you can't fix. And that kind of gets into the territory of then needing to modify your model. And if you have to modify your model, plastic putty is not the thing you need. You're going to start to need Milliput, or you're going to need green stuff, because you're literally changing the form of the miniature. You need different tools and different things to create stuff or fix problems. But when you get gluing, you just have to be cautious on each step you're going. And the best place to get this right is to do the dry fit. And once you got that dry fit like properly set up, even if the model doesn't stick together, you don't need to do that. You just need to make sure that the pieces are aligned. Then you can get going. And hopefully that will cover you for most instances. Just with that thought in mind, we can get down to building this miniature. A lot of tabletop war games and things like that, especially when it comes to assembling miniatures, come with instructions. And so if you're starting out, it's obviously great to follow the instructions. In something like the Warhammer 40k Kill Team set, it gives me all the means and what sprues that I need to cut out to make my miniature. And so I'm going to be making today the Guardsman hardened veteran model. In the hardened veteran model section, it tells me all the different numbers that I need to cut out, and then in the sort of order in which I need to actually build it. Now, this is a fair bit easy because Games Workshop have made it easy for me. They've given me instructions. But you will find that in a variety of other brands will not do that. And so it can be complicated about your order and how you go about doing those things. For the most part, I like to cut out every single piece from the sprue that I'm going to be working with that model. Okay, guys. So I'm gonna assemble this model for you guys. I'm gonna bring it up close and personal. So I got this camera right here. It's gonna be kind of in the way a little bit, but we're gonna show you through this camera and hopefully give you all the step-by-step about how to construct this model as cleanly as possible. Let's get to it. I have already taken the time to color the numbers that I know that I'm gonna clip. So I followed the instructions, just double checked myself, and then I'm gonna clip these things out. Take my clippers, use the back side of them, so the flat edge, and then I'm going to, say, get to here, this little piece right there, get to the back part, bring it up about as close as possible, and snip. Again, we're going to find the next bit here, snip. Boom, done. I got this piece here, let's keep going. Doing that. If you have a blunt pair of clippers, what will happen is that you'll end up pulling plastic and it can deform the shape of it. So it's worth making sure you have a good sharp pair of model clippers. That's all the pieces from this sprue. And I go to the other one here, we're gonna get to the body. If you feel uncomfortable bringing your pair of clippers to the very base or the very edge of the model where it connects to the sprue, or you have a pair of pliers that are not super strong, then it is worth giving a little bit of space between where you're clipping and the model, because you can always cut that stuff off later. And we are done with clipping. This is where we get to our X-Acto knife. Right here, take this out. Make sure we got a sharp blade, very, very important. And now we're going to get to the point of where we need to file down or cut away any of the excess gunk. Sharp part of the blade, you can see that this little nub that sits right there. Gonna take that bit and just slowly cut it off. Boom, look at that. Super clean, real easy. Super clean. We're gonna go to the other side. This is why we want a sharp knife. If we don't have a sharp knife, we'll apply too much force. And if we apply too much force, we are very, very likely to hurt ourselves. You can also see right there's a very light mold line also right there. Now the mold line comes about from the construction of the model itself. So this is where we take the back side of the blade and we just give it a light scraping. Wonderful. All right, that one piece is done. Moving along. Practically, we're just going to do this. Oh, look at that. Look at this cut here. Again, be careful. I don't think anyone likes looking at people cutting things with a knife. It's just like, oh, you're going to slice yourself open. And for the most part, I'm actually really, really very good with this type of thing. However, I once cut myself quite badly with a blunt knife when I was applying too hard. So when I say you need a sharp knife, I really do mean it. If you see this right there, see the scar? Just slipped caught me. Brianna wasn't very happy. But, you know, I was the one bleeding. It's funny when you cut yourself and someone else finds out you've done that, guess who gets in trouble? You do. And you've also cut yourself. It's funny how the world works. So it's pretty good, you know. I'm gonna go take a pass at it with some sandpaper when I'm ready. Along the way, we'll move that to the side. Second bit done. Let's go to this piece here. Now you don't need to be super meticulous. I mean, it just all depends on how much material you can live with. But obviously if you get it right here, you never have to go back and look at your past mistakes. So yeah, you eventually just do that, all of that stuff for every single piece until you have completed all of that. And once we've done that, then we get to the sanding. Excellent, so we've done the main part there. This blade is done. We don't have to use it anymore. We're just gonna take it out, put its cap back on for protection. Sanding sticks, woo, 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 woo. That's probably the noise they make. What we're doing with the sanding sticks is finding any of the main areas, especially the molding lines, and just giving them a quick sand, making sure that those things have been flattened out, removed, because we don't want any sign of them. And if we can just use these, then that's what we're going to use. But if we can't get to a certain place, because obviously the profile of a sanding stick is quite wide and flat, means that we're going to have to move to our sponges. Because it's such a fine grit sandpaper, and of course I've used it so much at this point in time, that it's not like, it doesn't really remove much. It only just sort of removes the top edges, which is great, because that's all I want. So in here is there's a little kind of, from my cut, I don't know if you can't really see it. It's just and this piece here is not very good at getting there. So this is where I might use a sponge just in that area. But I'll come back to it later. So I put that to a side, so I know for future that I'll come back to and give it a slight cleanup. Let's go here. Now you have to be careful with this, even with the sanding stick. Firstly, this here is quite curved. So this is the reason why I don't like using hard flat side files, because you can actually deform the plastic that you're cutting. But also, like you see this tiny little, it's like a little nub that sits here. It's kind of hard to see. It's part of the helmet design. I don't want to remove that because it's obviously part of the model. So I have to be extra careful. So all that knife work that I was doing beforehand really helps to make sure I don't have to do anything that I don't want to. So you can see this is definitely like a meticulous job doing all of this stuff, taking the time to individually inspect every part that you're putting down, which is time consuming. So interestingly enough, this is one of my least favorite parts. Not like on any individual model, I don't mind doing it on a singular, but I do mind it when it comes to doing like squad construction and stuff like that. It's just like, holy smokes, like spend many hours just finally removing these like little bits of mold lines and things from each particular model. And again, this just all comes down to how meticulous of a person, I guess maybe that you are, and how much you want to spend that time doing so. Some of us just want to get straight into gaming, and we don't mind some of that stuff. But for me, and like painting, you know, that's really important, and I really don't want to show that stuff. Okay, I'm gonna take my sanding sponge here. I'm gonna do a quick little round on the gun, because there are so many pieces of like ups and downs and like just so much detail that it's really hard to tackle every bit with a knife or with a sanding stick. So I'm just doing a sort of a rough double check. Excellent. And that's it, people. We are done with all of this sanding, cutting down, situating stuff. Now it just comes down to gluing, people. Gluing, I tell you. So what did we say beforehand? Dry fit that bastard. And he's a bastard. Normally we start with the big parts, like, okay, body and the leg. So we're gonna go, oh, okay, boom. That goes in nicely together. We do a double check, make sure that we're happy with how that would come together. Wonderful. And so we could probably just glue that together. There's another leg, there's some medals and 2 arms and a head. So sometimes I like try to hold it all together like so. Take the other leg, be like, how do I assemble this? Oh, he goes in like, so he goes in like this. It's very difficult to show you guys. It goes in like this, and then this thing will, this other piece covers it all up, just like so. So I'm pretty sure that I can glue that all together and I would be happy. So these pieces here, this is part of his hand, and actually this is part of his hand. It's like metal bionic thing. So I could just glue that directly onto it. Don't even have to wait until afterwards. So I will. Let's get to it. Woohoo! All right, so let's see. I'm gonna connect this. I'm gonna go like that. I wanna make sure all the locations that are gonna be glued, I think I can see them. Take this out. Boom, you see that? Yes, you guys do. So we take a little bit of it. We remove the excess or the amount of it off the side of the glass rim here. So it kind of goes back in. It also means that we have some control. We don't want it to be slopping everywhere. That's obviously a technical term when it comes to gluing, slopping. Kind of like that. We've done the dry fit, so I'm fairly confident of where I'm placing this glue, but it is important that you've seen where the glue is meant to go. Like that. And this literally is going to just melt together. So take this, slot that in, and hold it together for a moment. Great. So that's done. That's glued, and that's all the time it needed. We're gonna take the leg, we're gonna glue this bit here and just the inside section, and we're gonna apply that. So here, we take some of the glue, we take the excess off the edge. Give it a second, or, you know, apply a gentle push, and bang, it is glued. I'm going to take this arm here, and we've also got the robotic bit. And what are we going to do? Ooh, fiddly tiny little bits with my big old cumbersome fingers. That's what it's going to look like. So, slot fell out. So let's do the same thing. We know it's going to work. Bang. There you go. We'll let that just dry. Fantastic, we're almost done. Likely we're gonna put the head on first, but we can let's dry fit that for a second and see where that's gonna go. Okay. You know what I realized? I think I forgot to take a backpack. I'll find it. I will find that backpack. And I will show it who's boss. I think I'm gonna glue this on next. Because I don't know where the badge goes, but luckily if we pull out our handy dandy instruction manual. Okay, body, head on first, yeah? So there's a couple of key points that we're looking for with the helmet. Right there, the neck, this little piece here, and just the side where the sort of breather goes connects to. Look at that. That was very straightforward, wasn't it? Very straightforward. Wonderful. Next part, what are we going to do? We're going to do his medals. Because he's obviously a hardened veteran, and hardened veterans, well, they have medals. The question is, where does it go? Alright, I'm going to put the medals on afterwards because I don't know where his arm is going to be. Exactly. We've got to figure out where we want it. I think that's quite a good position. Next piece, we're going to do his bionic hand. Bionic hand time. Guess that's like it. I wonder if he's got a grenade. No, he's got like a controller in his hand. So we'll do that. I think that looks like the right position. Any other position looks a bit strange. Just double check the other side, make sure it's exactly where you want it to be. Boom. He's looking pretty good. Obviously, we're going to stick the medals. Now, the medals are going to be a tiny bit tricky because obviously now we've got this gun here, and I've got these massive sausage fingers versus this tiny little thing that's like a real pain in the butt to get to. I also have to find his backpack because obviously he's a weird looking dude with this huge hole in his back. So let me go and find that. Okay, excellent. Let's glue his backpack on. Put it like this, we go, whoop. Oh, well, it kind of just fits perfectly. Don't even have to glue it. So if you were one of those people who were like, oh, I don't want to glue the backpack on yet, I want to paint everything, I want to take it off and paint the bits where you would have a hard time getting to, this would be an ideal thing because it literally just push fits together, which is really nice. So I'm actually not going to glue it. I'm just going to leave it so, and then I can just take it off when I'm painting so I can get to some of the hard to paint parts, which is great. And now, lastly, this metal hell. And you almost might need tweezers here. Let's see where it would actually sit. Does it sit right there? I think it does. So I made it stick to my finger by using some spit. Obviously that's a pro technique. This is gonna suck a little bit. So I'm gonna take this. That was pretty good. I'm kind of surprised. Excellent, I feel pretty good about all of this. Now the last thing to do is glue it onto its base, which you just take the last bit of the glue, add it to his feet. You can be a little bit more liberal here if you choose to be. Get his feet down, and boom, look at that. We have a completed Guardsman. Took forever. So yeah, excellent. We are done here with this model. We just let him fully dry. Shouldn't take very long. We'll get to priming and painting him at some point. You can see how long or how meticulous you can be when it comes to like actually assembling your model and being careful and removing mold lines and getting everything set up so that you are going to make this model and as cleanly as possible. There's a bunch of work to it, and there is nothing but just patience and time. So it's great to have something off in the background whilst doing it because, you know, it's intensive, but it is rewarding at the end of the day. And when you get a whole squad of them all built, it looks pretty magnificent. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully that was enjoyable or useful information for you guys down the future. If you guys liked it, again, please press the like and or subscribe. There's gonna be tons of more videos, footage, and things that we're gonna be doing specifically about this field of miniature painting.